Hello, everyone. Today we're learning Daf Vav of Torah Ohr Megillus Esther. The first of the two Maimarim we're going to learn is ובבואה לפני המלך עם הספר. Now, our sages say that there's 6 millennium of עלמא, which means concealment, 6,000 years of concealment, and 1,000 years of xarov, of destruction of that concealment. So that destruction of concealment is the level of the idea of tranquility. During those first 6,000 years, we have a roller coaster ride throughout history where we ascend and descend, and we have, this ascent and descent in our soul and spirituality and our physicality with regards to our bodies. Sometimes we have peaceful times and other times we have the opposite, and we descend and have more difficult challenges throughout history. But we do know at the end of the day that every descent is for the sake of a subsequent ascent. So we have the 4 general categories. We have ascents within the Garden of Eden, of the lower and higher Garden of Eden. And we also have physical ascents within our bodies of Yemos Mashiach, the days of Mashiach, and the resurrection of the dead. And all these different levels of ascents, aliyos, they're called. It's, the basis is from the Tehillim, Yelchu Mechayil L'Choyil, that we ascend from level to level. That all these different levels is, connected to that whole idea in the Megillah, where the women, when they were preparing for the beauty pageant before Achashverosh, they go from the Beis HaNashim, from the house of the women, to the Beis HaNashim Sheni, to the second house of the women. So that's actually an allusion to the lower Garden of Eden and the higher Garden of Eden. And between each of these major levels of ascending, we have in the book of Daniel, the Nahar Dinur, the river of fire, I guess river of spiritual fire that separates between each level. And I guess in order to really get from a lower level in our Avodas Hashem to a higher level, we first have to, so to speak, submerge ourselves spiritually in this, river of fire, which causes us to forget the advantage of the lower level that we were previously in, to really nullify ourselves, which allows us to ascend to the higher level. And that's what it means when it says in the Megillas Esther that uvazeh hanara ba el hamelech, that the woman came to the king. So what does it mean, ubazeh? Ubazeh is that, so to speak, that pillar, that separation from world to world, from level to level, that allows us to have that bittul, that dinur, that river of fire that allows us to enter this portal to Hashem, of godliness. And just like we have the spiritual elevation of different levels, we so too have with regards to our bodies, we have the days of Mashiach, and we have the resurrection of the dead. But that's with regards to the first 6,000 years. But that 7 millennia, that is the millennium of destruction, which is the destruction of concealment, which is essentially that plateau in which we reach that highest level that we really don't have any higher levels to ascend to, which is that highest level, which is kind of like connected to the idea of the Shemitah year. Just like we have 7 years where we plant and grow our crops, then we have that 7th year that we stop growing the crops and we're able to take a step back, reach that plateau, and just appreciate all the accomplishments that we have done. And this is called menucha. It's a state of tranquility, which there's no level to ascend to that's higher. And that's the whole idea of the destruction of the prior concealment, which leads to this concept of tranquility. And it's written, the L'chu chazu mifalais Elokim asher sam shamois ba'aretz. It says in the pasuk that to go see the actions of God, that he places destruction on the land, meaning on the land of the nations. But our sages actually say, don't read shamois, destruction. You should actually interpret it to mean shemois, which means names. So what's this whole concept of names? The whole idea of the destruction, that last millennium of destruction, of concealment, this is actually a period of tranquility, which is the end of all elevations of reaching higher and higher levels. But the whole concept is despite all this hard ascension of levels and reaching this level of tranquility and godly revelation, all of that is just a name of God, which is really the most external aspect of Hashem, which we call malchus. It says Yachid Chayolami Melech, that Hashem's malchus, which is the lowest aspect of him, is the only way that we can actually relate to Hashem in this world currently, during these years. And the whole idea is that Hashem is Chei Ha'ilamim, that he enlivens the worlds. And that's how we relate to Hashem on the level of malchus, just as a creator and one that gives vitality to the worlds. And that's what makes him a king, because the whole idea of a king is that that we have we reach higher and higher levels through our connection to the king, and in every single shmita, we are able to take a step back and recognize our connection to the king only on the level of malchus, and we benefit. We derive a very special pleasure, an oineg, from this, glow of radiance of God's divine presence. And there's infinite levels of this pleasure that one can experience from God's divine presence. But all this is only just an expression of God's malchus, of his kingship, which is the lowest, most external level of Hashem. But really, there's much higher levels that our thought can't even grasp. And this concept of pleasure, oineg it's called, this is the idea of the expression of will. So what's the concept here? Ratzon, which is will, it's actually the external most expression of a person's pleasure, because we know practically that when what is a person going to want? What is his will going to go after? It's going to go after something that he has an innermost pleasure or desire towards. If he has a pleasure for something, then he's going to want it. So by Hashem. So God's most innermost will is the 613 biblical mitzvahs and the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs, which actually comprise the 620 pillars of light, which is God's supernal pleasure. That's what really gives God pleasure. And all the mitzvahs require kavana, special intent within the heart, which through us doing the mitzvahs and connecting in the most inner depths of our heart within our will, then we are able to cleave to God on a very essential level through the mitzvahs. As it says in the blessings over mitzvahs, we say asher kedishana b'mitzvaysav, that we derive a lot of pleasure and joy through the fact that God sanctifies us through doing these mitzvahs. And just like there's a pleasure in these different levels of ascent for ad infinitum, so too with regards to will, ratzon, which is the essence of the innermost depths of the heart, which has the name Knesset Yisrael, which is the Jewish people. As we explain in another place, that we also have so many different levels of ascent within our connection to Hashem's ratzon from the innermost depths of our heart, until we reveal this will of God down here in our souls, into our hearts, and ad infinitum. In order to reach this level of mili b'shamayim v'imcha lechafatzti ba'aretz, which is this whole concept of not wanting anything earthly, but only wanting godliness and heavenliness. Kali sheri levavi, that everything mortal and physical is just not worth anything. Ba'aretz hu b'chinas shamais ba'aretz. The whole idea of the earth ends up just being totally destroyed, meaning that any physicality is just something that conceals godliness, that really recognize that everything is all Hashem, and that we just want to be one with Hashem and totally unite with him on that most essential level. And that is the reason why this is the whole concept of when that one moment of tshuva and good deeds in this world is greater than the entire world to come. So what's this concept? That what is the whole idea of the life of the world to come, olam haba, that represents all these different elevations ad infinitum that comes from this supernal pleasure of God that one has when we do reach these levels and connect to God's infinite pleasure and benefit from God's radiance of his divine presence, which is the idea of malchus, which is shamos ba'aretz. And we recognize that there's no worlds, and the world doesn't really exist. It's just all godliness. However, even though that is true, but when we do tshuva, when we return to Hashem and do good deeds in this world, which is connecting our essence of our hearts from the depths of our heart, which is enclosed in the good deeds that we do, which is the 613 biblical mitzvahs, the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs, that reveals God's supernal will, which causes us to ascend even higher than the level of oineg, of pleasure, because oineg, pleasure, only comes to souls through contemplation of the soul, which is only according to the level that one can comprehend. But when you connect to Hashem's ratzon, his will, it's actually a level even higher than comprehension, transcends comprehension, which is the gulgalto, which is the skull, which is actually encompasses and surrounds the head, surrounds the brain, which represents the intellect. So it's even beyond intellect. And that's what it means when Esther came before the king, לפני המלך, that represents Esther coming to the king, represents the Jewish people coming before God's essence, so to speak, which is even higher than God's malchus or revelation of pleasure or any of those lower levels. And when we as a Jewish people do the mitzvahs and connect to Hashem's essence, that can cause Hashem to transform the decree, any negative decrees to go to change the course of history for the good. Next paragraph, Ubira Inyan. In order to explain, one explanation of all of what we're saying here is that in our practical avodas Hashem, in this world, is we have to refine the good from the bad. And when we refine the good of the bad in this world, there's infinite levels. And the way we refine this physical world is through our chachma, through our wisdom. The word chachma comes from 2 words, koyach ma, power of what? Ma is also a name of Hashem, through the power of Hashem, which is the idea of nullifying ourselves and being included in godliness. And that's what it means to come before the king, meaning becoming higher to the king's essence, which is because the whole idea of melech, king, is the level of ha'olam, which is the whole idea of concealment, right? There's so many concealments in this world, which causes a separation between us and Hashem, which is the idea of malchus, which causes us to be two separate people. There's the king, and then there's us, the people. We're separate, and we have to connect to Hashem. But when we nullify ourselves and we come to this higher level, we're able to cleave to God's essence and change the scenario, just like in the Purim story. And this refinement happens specifically through activating our thought. Just like we see in actuality, in physicality, that when a person thinks about something, what happens? He's thinking about, he has all these positive thoughts that he wants to retain and extraneous thoughts that he wants to really get rid of. So what happens is he retains the positive thoughts that he wants to keep, and then he disposes of all the negative thoughts. So too, we have this idea that we push away the evil to the uttermost extremities. And therefore, so we have this idea of getting rid of the evil and refining the world. And so when we do an arousal from below, an Isur Stil Sata, which is the idea of coming before the king, just like in the Queen Esther came to the king, before the king, through activating our wisdom in refining the world, then Hashem will respond in kind by giving us an arousal from above, which is the words Amar Ima Sefer. He will, I guess, write in his book that he will, I guess, respond in kind, which is the level of Sefer represents the combination of letters that push away evil to the uttermost extremities, just like the dregs of wine as sinks to the bottom. And we have, in court cases, we have prosecutors that try to prevent a person from doing the serving Hashem properly. We have, I guess, our or other external factors, internal, external factors, physical, spiritual factors that try to prevent us from serving Hashem. But when we prevail, Hashem will return, as it says in the Megillah, Yashuv machshavtei hara al reishai, that Hashem will flip the coin, so to speak, and cause any negativity that was previously accusing towards us to go flip back and destroy the evil that was trying to destroy us. And that refinement is through elevating to elevating ourselves to God's supernal thought, specifically when we attach our thoughts with God's thoughts and we elevate ourselves, and that causes this descent and pushing away to the uttermost extremities to push the evil to the uttermost extremities. And because that when the evil is sunken so low to the uttermost extremities of I guess the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, just like wine, it says vayager miza achshmaraha yimsu, that these dregs of wine, they are totally sunken down to the bottom, so they don't really have much of an effect on the rest of the world because we push them down so far. And that's the whole reason that we have this concept that wicked people and wickedness, they first, before they fall, they have this period of, I guess, inflated exaltedness, and then they come crashing down. So just like Cahnman did, he had this great high position and he fell. And it says in the pasuk in Ovadia that if that Hashem, if anyone, this wicked, is exalted, Hashem will say that he'll cause him to fly right back down. Specifically from there, he will cause him to fall. And this causes the this fall, and Hashem causes the fall. And it is because he wasn't able to stand in this high exalted level that he was previously in, on a level of safer. What does that mean? That he wasn't able to cleave to Hashem. His exaltedness wasn't a result of the fact that he was doing God's will. It was because he was going against God's will. So therefore, any exaltedness is only going to be temporary. So therefore, he gets, comes crashing down. All the negativity comes crashing down. And an analogy of this is the idea of excrement or trash that's in the toilet or in the bathroom or in the garbage dump, that it's in the proper place it needs to be. So when evil comes crashing down into the lowest of the low, it's where it needs to be. So once that already happens, it doesn't bother us anymore. So just like if there is excrement that's in a toilet, it's not going to bother us because that's where it needs to be, pushed away all the way to the othermost extremity and out of the way, and the very lowest levels. And we as a Jewish people become elevated to the level of safer, which is the idea of God's supernal thought, which is after the Jewish people become elevated through our innermost connection from our heart to come before God's essence. And that's not the case when we're down here. We still need to work on refining the world. It's impossible to have more refinement in the level of dregs. So too, literally with regards to the animal soul in every single person, individual, that it's impossible to have the animal soul become refined, meaning to separate, for our animal soul, to separate the evil from the good and to transform the good in it from negativity to positivity, from darkness to light. We have the only way to transform the negativity within our animal soul to holiness is to first refine our godly soul, and only then will we be able to elevate and refine the negativity and transform it to holiness. And that is through activating our thought, speech, and action, and making sure our thought, speech, and action is completely involved and subsumed in Torah and mitzvahs. Then we have this, which is the Torah mitzvahs, is the expression of God's holy will. And so that's the whole idea of the pasuk, v'haisa nefesh adoni tzrura b'tzrachem, that the soul of my master becomes, bound up within the bounds of life, which is Hashem, and in being bound to God's supernal will, we enclose our soul higher and higher and higher, to this level of the skull, which is even higher than wisdom and intellect, which is Hashem's essence. Thank you so much. And that is the end of the first mimer of this daf. And we are now going to move on to the second mimer of this daf. So the second mimer, v'kibel haYehudim eis asher achilu lasos. So what does it mean that the Jews received that which they started already? That's referring to the fact that they started their receiving of the Torah by Har Sinai at Matan Torah. But that was only the beginning. But in the times of Haman, that is when they finally received the Torah. The full receiving of the Torah was completed by the Purim story. And so our question is more general about Matan Torah in general. Avraham Avinu, why did he, what's so special about Matan Torah if Avraham Avinu already did all the mitzvahs and he fulfilled the whole Torah? So what is the advantage of Matan Torah if Avraham Avinu already did the Torah, observed the Torah? So next paragraph, it's the advantage of Avraham Avinu is that he was halech v'nesaya, which is the whole concept of ratza v'shuv. He had a ton of bittul, self-nullification. He was, the word Avraham comes from the word aver ma, which is he's nothing but a limb of Hashem. So he had that incredible bittul and love for Hashem in a way of ratza v'shuv, and running and returning. And this is through his beinunus, his meditation and contemplation and the greatness of Hashem, but specifically in the name of Hashem, but not Hashem's essence. Because the whole idea of creation is that it's a lower name of Hashem. It's something that's not Hashem's essence, and we're not able to relate to Hashem's essence beyond the Creator just through His bonus, because it's too beyond our realm of grasp. That's why it says at the beginning of the Chumash, Bereshis bara Elokim. It doesn't say Bereshis bara Havaya, because the lower aspect of Hashem, that is how it relates directly to the world as is creating the world. But the higher essence of Hashem, so to speak, or Shem Havaya, that is more, Hashem, it's just more direct, more derech mamela, more just Hashem says and it is created. But it's not that he's actually actively invested in creating the world. So that is the whole idea, that when we meditate on the greatness of Hashem, we become nullified, the soul becomes nullified to Hashem's infinite greatness, and that the power of the soul is normally not able to even tolerate such a great, high, infinite light. But the advantage of Avraham Avinu, that he was actually able to tolerate such a great infinite light. So that was Avraham Avinu. And La'asud Lavo in the future, it actually says that instead of the idea before, we're saying that we're only able to relate to Hashem as he is a creator and that level of malchus, which is more external aspect of Hashem. The truth is that La'asud Lavo will actually be able to see Hashem eye to eye, so to speak, that we will have such a great joy that it'll almost be like crying, like tears of joy of revelation, that will actually be able to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on such a great, lofty level that's completely beyond limit and beyond normal comprehension. Next paragraph, V'hine, beholds the whole advantage of Avraham Avinu was really great. The source of his soul was so high that most known people were not even able to come close to what Avraham Avinu was. But the Torah was given specifically 214 positive mitzvahs and 635 negative mitzvahs, which correspond to ratza v'shuv. which this I guess running, coming close to Hashem, and then retreating, which corresponds respectively to the positive and negative mitzvahs, which are really the vessels for God's infinite light to become enclosed. And so just to understand this idea of light and vessels, or in kalim, that the mitzvahs are almost like vessels, are like kalim, just like limbs are a vessel to the light, which is, I guess, the brain and the actual vitality from the brain that's sending messages down into different limbs in their body. So too, the mitzvahs are vessels, so to speak, that they contain the infinite godly light that's able to express itself into the world. And that's what it means that the Jews said, Nasa v'nishma. What does it mean, Nasa v'nishma? We will do represents the mitzvahs. Meaning, Nasa, we will do the mitzvahs in order to create a vessel, a keli, and only then, v'nishma, we will be able to draw down the infinite or in self light into the mitzvahs. So we're able to have that paradox where it's a complete infinite light, but it's able to be tolerated by the, and specifically because of the kalim that's able to exist. Because a light without a vessel or without a kli is not even a kli, it's not a vessel. The best analogy for this is fire, because fire is such a lofty and one of the greatest of the elements, of the four elements. But if you don't have a wick, you don't have any way to contain the light, like at night, you don't have the sun's not out. You know, there's no way to actually hold on to the fire. Then it's not only do you not have the wick or the candle, you don't have the fire either. So in, I guess, avodas ha'adam, in our personal service, there's a concept of that an ignoramus can never become a chassid. What is a chassid? A chassid comes from chesed, which means love and kindness, right? So this love is really the light, represents the light. And the knowledge a person has in ability to learn Torah and do practical mitzvahs and know what the mitzvahs are, that is the vessel in order for this light of chesed, of love, to really penetrate a person. But if a person isn't knowledgeable and isn't able to do the mitzvahs, then it's impossible for them to really be a chassid. And also the main cause for drawing down the infinite or in sof is that it becomes enclosed in Torah mitzvahs. That the main Torah and mitzvahs should be a vessel for that infinite light. As it is known that the source and life force of a person really comes from the food that we eat. So I guess this is an analogy that the higher something is, the lower there's a certain element that we have to rely on the lower elements to sustain us. So too, the infinite or in sof light is dependent on the kli. So meaning, even though the light you think is higher than the vessel, it still depends on the vessel for its existence, so to speak. And through the mitzvahs and fulfilling the mitzvahs in actuality, we actually create the kli, which makes it possible for the light to become drawn down. And this is also the concept of that Am Haaretz can't be a chassid. That like we were saying before, that it's impossible to have this drawing down of love and light from above without the vessel of Torah mitzvahs. And from here we can understand, it's understood the advantage of Avraham Avinu, that he fulfilled the whole Torah, right? So, so sometimes we see that the fact that Avraham Avinu fulfilled the whole Torah in the positive sense, but sometimes in the negative sense, because he didn't really merit the Torah. So which one is it? Did he merit to fulfill the Torah, or did he not merit the Torah? So really both are true, because from the source of his soul, which is very lofty, he did merit to create a certain level of vessel on a more lofty plane. He created Kalim, but more on a loftier plane for the Or Ein Sof to come down, right? Because at the end of the day, Avraham is Aver Ma, which is the letters Aver Ma, which is a limb of Hashem. So he did create a Kli, but the mitzvahs themselves really fully mitzvahs until the actual giving and receiving of the Torah. So therefore, he wasn't really fully able to create a Kli enough for the full essence of God's essence to be drawn down here. And this is the concept. We're going to talk about the concept of the horse, first about the levush malchus, of the royal garments that was worn in the Purim story. That the royal garments refers to Torah mitzvahs. Just like, when we put on the talis, we recite the pasuk of Tehillim, Oita Or Kasalma, that we are enwrapping ourselves with a garment of light. So what is the garment of light? That's the Torah. And the Torah is almost like a garment for the light of the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light of God, to become enclosed in the Torah. And the mitzvahs are the garments as well. And for example, chesed, etc., through the chesed, through the different attributes. And this, hamshacha of the lavush, of the garments, which is the enclothement, the slabshus of the infinite Or Ein Sof in Torah mitzvahs, in practicality. This is through the whole idea of sus. Sus is a horse. So what is this idea of a horse? We have two samachs, a samach, a vav, and a samach. So what does that mean? That a horse has this idea of being totally nullified to its rider. And we will see how a horse has a very unique position, in that a horse can take its rider to the highest of high places, to places that a normal person would never be able to reach on their own, right? But on the opposite, a horse can also, unfortunately, take a person lower to very low places, lower than he would ever be able to reach on his own. So this refers to two elements of these two directions, these two levels. There's mimata l'mayla and l'mala l'mata, from below to above, above to below. From below to above, we have the sus rechvei rama vayam, that Hashem, cast the horse into the sea. That we have the horse in the negative light, malamata, that the revelation of this nullification, of subjugating and transforming negativity, that we can transform this horse to positivity, which is just like we see that everything has opposites. For example, Avraham, we have chesed of holiness and chesed of unholiness. We have Avram Avinu, and from him came Yishmael, which was chesed of unholiness. So now we have a concept here of meditation in the Or Ein Sof with bittul. And through that, we actually transform any attribute from the negative attribute to the positive attribute. And similarly, by way of analogy, it's possible to have two opposites exist at once, at least in the realm of thought, because in the realm of thought, we can have two opposite ideas in our thoughts that are completely opposite each other, but they can exist in the same, stream of thought. New paragraph, v'zehu. And this is what it means, ki sirkav al susecha markvesecha Yeshua, that we draw down this idea of salvation, and for that we use our garments and the horse, so to speak, for holiness. And we transform the whole situation. As our sages say, that in the future, the tzaddikim will say, kadosh. What is the idea of kadosh? Kadosh is drawing down the holiness into the vav, the letter vav, which refers to hamshacha, drawing down. And in the future time to come, we'll have all this hamshachas from that were drawn down from above to below, that now will be elevated from below to above, that even the holy angels will actually receive influence from the world, from down below to above. And behold, this, hamshacha of God's infinite Or Ein Sof is on this level that the Jews started to receive the Torah on Mount Sinai at Matan Torah, but it happened slowly because they're afraid that it'd be too much of a godly revelation to receive it all at once, because otherwise the Jewish people would just pass out and not be able to receive the godly revelation. But with regards to the Purim story, the kibel haYehudim, the idea of Kabbalah receiving, means they received it all at once. And so that shows an advantage of the Purim story, even over the initial receiving the Torah Mount Sinai. And the whole idea is the kibel haYehudim, that the Jews received the Torah. What is the idea of Yehudim? A Jew comes from the word haydaya, offering thanks and recognition, acknowledgement, and blessing. So Hayda'a actually is not the idea of revelation in its own right, but because God's infinite Or Ein Sof is so beyond revelation, it can't really be revealed in the typical sense, because it can't even be grasped. But you can still hayda, you can still have a general acknowledgement of that, and through nullifying ourselves, we can actually grasp to a certain extent this great level of godliness. And then the Jewish people will merit the great nullification, the great bittul, through their mesirus nefesh and making Kiddush Hashem. They reach this level. And it's important to note that the Jewish people, technically, if they wanted to convert and disavow their Jewishness and convert to another religion, technically Haman would have no problem with that, and they wouldn't be included in this decree to be annihilated. But instead, all the Jewish people were steadfast in their resolve to do whatever it takes and to remain as Jews and not and even risk their lives to stay Jewish, despite the fact that they were at risk of annihilation. And through this Mesiras Nefesh, that's what caused them to merit having that merit to receive the Torah in full actuality, which was which was able to make it possible that that the most infinite essential level of God, which is called the Or Ein Sof, is able to be drawn down here in this world, mamish, in actuality, practically. Have a wonderful day.